Hello everyone and welcome back to YPAC. Today we're talking about Nikki Haley, who, surprise, is still in the Republican race for the GOP nomination for president. Now, looking at the polling, as we do pretty much every video, Real Clear Politics has her almost 60 points behind Donald Trump. And sure, she's made progress from being around like 6 or 5% when she first entered the race, and now is at 16%, low from her high of 18%, but still, she's made progress. But so is Donald Trump. He used to be in the high 40s, low 50s, but now he's at the mid 70s. He's, again, 60 points almost ahead of Nikki Haley. And so anyone looking at this polling and following it would ask themselves, why hasn't Nikki Haley dropped out yet? All of the other candidates have done so at this point, except for Ryan Binkley, but obviously there are going to be some long shot candidates that stay in the race until the end. But when we're talking about actual contenders here, who, again, maybe Nikki Haley wouldn't even be considered an actual contender since Donald Trump is, again, so far ahead, but still, putting that aside, everyone else has dropped out of the race except for Nikki Haley. So why is she staying in when she obviously is so far behind Donald Trump in the polling? In a recent interview with the AP Associated Press, Nikki Haley revealed that she and her team had decided to not at least drop out of the race until after Super Tuesday, which would mean that she would still be in the race by the time that the South Carolina GOP primaries roll around on the 24th, this Saturday. That means that basically Nikki Haley wants to get slaughtered alive in her home state, where she was governor for 6 years, because all the polling shows that she's going to lose South Carolina, like she has lost every other state. She lost Iowa. She came in third after Ron DeSantis, and then New Hampshire she actually did pretty well. She got, I think, around 40% to Donald Trump's 50-some. And then South Carolina is going to be a bigger difference for her. She's going to lose that much more terribly than she did New Hampshire. So I guess she wants to suffer that loss. But she said that she wouldn't drop out until at least after Super Tuesday. And Super Tuesday, if you don't know, is a Tuesday in either early March or late February. That happens every 4 years, where about like 12 or so states have their presidential primaries. And so that's happening on March 5th, where, again, about a dozen or so of these states. And so Nikki Haley wants to wait until all these states have their say as well, until she makes her decision. But from the language from her team and her donors and herself, it seems like she doesn't actually want to drop out anytime soon, not even until after Super Tuesday. It seems like she just wants to be in this race for the long haul. And there are a couple of reasons for this. First of all, her language kind of seems to be surrounded around the fact that she wants to wait and be the second option in case something happens to Donald Trump, whether he's put behind bars or he has too many legal qualms to deal with and can't be president if something happens where he's not on the ballot. Nikki Haley just wants to be there as the second choice. At this point, I think she has around 17 delegates to Donald Trump's 63, so it's not that, I think it's still somewhat ridiculous. I think that we all know that Donald Trump is going to be the nominee at this point, but still, she has some delegates behind her back if something were to happen to Donald Trump, certainly more than any of the other candidates. So she would be the second pick if something were to happen to Donald Trump. And so she talks about that as well. She talks about his numerous qualms in the courtrooms, actually posed that as a question to the AP as why they're not asking about that. Instead of asking me what states I'm going to win, why don't we ask how Donald Trump's going to win a general election after spending a full year in a courtroom? This is hyperbole. He hasn't spent a whole year in a courtroom, and a lot of the charges against him are, suffering a bit, specifically Fannie Willis's case down in Georgia, which we're making a video on that as well, explaining everything that happened. So some of the cases don't seem to be going the way, but another, like in New York, Letitia James, $355 million that Donald Trump has to, and his organization now have to suffer through. But anyways, that doesn't really mean that he's going to be banned from pursuing the presidency. And then with the Supreme Court, with the 14th Amendment, I don't think that's going to go the way that the Democrats want either, since, the Supreme Court is obviously 6-3. He put 3 of the judges in there himself, so that's obviously going to pan out his way. And so Nikki Haley, her thought process is understandable, that she wants to be there in case something happens to Donald Trump, but still, I don't think that she's necessarily going to win this nomination. I think that when we're looking at the raw numbers, when we're looking at the people that like Trump, there's so much support surrounding Trump. And yes, does Nikki Haley have big donors? Yes, of course she does. She just started another $500,000 TV campaign in Michigan. And so she's keeps on funneling money, and that started on Wednesday, yesterday that I'm filming this. So she has just started another series of TV ads for her campaign. So she's obviously not short on money. One of her largest donors had a big fundraising event earlier this month in New York. And so, the money keeps coming in, right? There's obviously going to be a certain amount of support for Nikki Haley because, she's the anti-Trump candidate. If anyone doesn't like Trump, then they're going to support her. There's a large camp of Americans that don't like Trump and then don't like Biden either. So I guess she's just relying on that support to come to her in her campaign, but I don't know how much money can change her stance in this campaign, right? She's gotten a lot of money already. The RNC seems to be behind her rather than Trump because she's, has a better image surrounding her, but still, I don't know how far that's going to take her. Another thing that she could be relying on is that primaries are usually decided by the extremist wings of a party. And Donald Trump caters to that segment of the Republican Party much, much more than Nikki Haley does. And so that could be another reason that he's doing better in the polls, but I kind of doubt that, maybe a slight bit. But again, when we're looking at the polls, when he's almost 60 points up, you expect that kind of turnout. So I don't know how much that's impacting it, but in theory, it could, of course. In 2020, we saw that with the Democratic presidential primaries, that Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders did much better than Joe Biden. And Joe Biden, of course, obviously became the candidate and then won the presidency, yada, yada. But the point is that those extremists that cater to the more extreme wings of the party, of the Democratic Party in that case, did far better in the primaries than did Joe Biden, who was seen as a more independent candidate. So now Nikki Haley may be using that similar logic, right? She's like, I'm not doing as well in the primaries, but that's because the primaries are decided among by the more extremist wings of the party and the more radical wings. So, that could be one of the reasons that she's not doing as well. And Nikki Haley does rely on the moderate and independent vote a lot, so she could be waiting for that. But still, that applies to general election. So unless she gets to that point, which I think she could have a very, very fair chance of beating Joe Biden, even more so than Donald Trump, maybe that's why the RNC is going to funnel more and more money into her. But again, how much does money impact it over actual people wanting Donald Trump? Because they just, they want to see the end to this story. A fifth and sixth and honestly, no, like 9th and 10th season of the Donald Trump show. Again, the independent and moderate vote isn't going to play as much of a part unless she actually gets the general election, which she won't, because the primaries, again, decided by the extremists, are obviously favored toward Donald Trump. And again, besides that, he just raw numbers has more people supporting him. Overall, Nikki Haley is looking much more long-term into this race. She seems to be wanting to at least stay in until the RNC's national convention in July, where they officially announce their party's candidate. And she hasn't announced if she's going to drop out of the race when, and if, I guess it's an if, but pretty much when Donald Trump reaches the 50% threshold of delegates to win the nomination. She hasn't announced any of that. She wants to be in this for the long haul. And she's probably hoping and staking out until Donald Trump has some sort of, problem with the law, and that prevents him from becoming president or something. I think that's going to be her breaking point when she officially ends her campaign. Since the beginning, she's been pretty headstrong about this. She wants to stay in this race. She wants to run as a Republican, doesn't want to join a third party like No Labels or something else. She wants to stay in this race as a Republican, win it as a Republican. Thank you for watching. See you next time.